This is the first Māori fashion department in Auckland City in New Zealand's history, and it's in the premium fashion district. It's unheard of, it's unprecedented.
It is culture directly immersed straight into the heart of commerce in Auckland. Statement.
It is, but it's also, because we don't have any reference points, so we don't have any history of what we're trying to create here, it's our first sort of like feeler of the environment and how we actually fit into the market, and you know what I mean? Like how we work together in a retail environment, how it all rolls.
How did this come about?
I founded KΑHUI Fashion Collective back in 2017 just because it was a need. There was a need. You know, there was no support for any kind of indigenous aesthetic within the fashion realm. Mainstream doors were just shut to that. So anyone who was trying to create that kind of aesthetic or ethos or way of being had nowhere to sell, no sort of support systems around how to build their businesses, or just where to find basic things like a machinist or a pattern drafter or whatever. You know, people were really, really closed off. So we wanted to do a couple of things to turn the industry on its head. It's not a very sharing environment at all. Like, people will stab you before they share their contacts and stuff.
I know the feeling. Welcome to business.
So we were like, well, I was like, you know, I don't like, it feels awful to have to maneuver yourself around in that kind of environment. So I was like, no, this needs to stop, and the way that it stops is by walking the talk. So I took 5 designers over to China, shared all my experience, networks, anything I could with them to try and help lift their businesses. 2 years later, last year, I took 15 Māori creatives over to China to try and expand their businesses, and this time we had a focus on getting into market as well.
So is it kind of a tipping point where it goes from I'm waiting for others to give me the opportunity by playing their game, to stuff this, if we don't be proactive ourselves, no one's going to give us shit?
Totes.
No, but I think of it, it's like offense versus defense, right? It's like, okay, this is how the game's being played. Every maneuver is always a block, so what are the options? And it's either like, sit back, take it, nothing happens, and it whittles down, or probably what you've probably realised is the strength of your networks and collaboration. Like, you can open these doors and pull these levers, but have you found that the buy-in, as soon as it became a collective, has changed the energy of the options of, like, in the commercial landscape with what? Yeah.
Couple layers there. So mindsets have shifted slightly with a couple of international successes and exposures that we have had in our actual brand, our individual brand. I think the thing that people are freaking out about with this collective is that everyone's come up in 30 years of New Zealand fashion where they protect their patch, and it's not sharing and whatever, and we're like, we're going to do exactly the opposite to that, because that's what feels organic and normal to us as Māori. So we're going to do everything that we can to not only grow our brands but grow everyone's. And I think when what people think is a new idea system, it's not. It's an ancient idea system, and it's a very indigenous idea system. I think when people see things that they think they haven't seen before, they think it's innovation, and so all these buzzwords start coming out. Oh, it's sustainability, it's ethical, and it's like, well, we were doing all of that anyway. It's just now you're listening. Yeah.
And when things are fragmented, the power of consolidation with brand, it's weird because they were there the whole time, but all of a sudden the perception changes because they see it differently.
Yeah. It's like telling a nursery rhyme to someone for the first time 100 million times, and then they go, "Oh man, that was such a cool story."
So, but for you're at both ends, because you're a creator, but also you've got a community at the top. Why the need that you felt that you had to lead this? Because you could have just had your own patch. You didn't need to open the Rolodex. You didn't need to open these doors for other. Like, do you feel it's a weight for you that you need to do that for others? Like, do you think you've passed that tipping point of, like, not prove yourself to others, but now providing value to the platform which you now have? Like, do you feel that's like a thing?
The thing is a responsibility to give back to the culture that you're drawing from, and that on an emotional level and on a creative level, and so there's this responsibility to obviously reciprocate that. And so that was always there long before we even started the label. Like, in any way you know, that my husband and I just being human beings, that was just always there. However, in this case, I don't know if you guys have seen the movie, the documentary Merita Mita, but there's a line in there that she said, and I think like I might have spoken to maybe 10 or 12 of my girlfriends, and they all said, I felt like she was talking to me. And I felt the same way, and she said, if not me, then who? So if not me, then who? Like seriously, if I wasn't going to do it, then who was going to do it?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Buddy of mine ended up winning X Games gold medal in ski stuff. His dad said when he was younger, someone's got to be the best. Why not you?
Yeah.
And it changed the thinking of like, well, someone's got to. So that's cool. And how is it feeling like mother hen, bringing it all together and then watching like it? Is it because as a creator, you think of it, you visualize it, you create, you bring it to the real world. Is the stoke for you the joy of watching the physical reality of it?
Yeah, I think when you start to really move into your power,
Your truth.
you lose all fear. Like there's something about not being scared of the failure, not being scared of the perception, not being scared of anything, and just knowing that this is what you have to do. And so that's always been there. And of course there's been challenges like there is with anything, and there's, you know, when you're dealing with a group of creatives,
Herding cats.
oh my god, you know, it's like dealing with 20 of me. So it's just like
But you know the feeling. So you,
madness. There's a lot of laughter. You know, there's some theatrical moments. It's the only thing I put it down to. But underneath it all is a group of really good humans. Like seriously, really good humans. Like, you know, the stereotypes that you hear around fashion, and they're out there. That just doesn't. It just doesn't exist here. The ego doesn't exist here. You know, it's really about inclusion and manakitanga, kaitiakitanga, creating something. Now they all know that we have a responsibility to make sure that there's a platform there for all the other designers that are coming through, because before there wasn't. So now, you know, and
it's a pay it forward with profit.
yeah. Oh, I'm going to steal that.
Go nuts. I just came out with it. It's go nuts. But you know what I mean? Like I totally get it. Like.
It's like it just pays forward in so many ways. I mean, one of the biggest things is that there'll be some fashion students right now that are sitting in their first, second, third degrees, wherever they're studying, and they would have been told in any one of those years, there's no place commercially for you if you want to have a full Indigenous aesthetic. So let's start looking at, you know, let's start moulding you into this and that. And I know that would have hurt their, you know, their ahua and their creative role. And for them to see something like this, those are the ones that you really want to be like, you do whatever you want to, you do you.
You're creating breadcrumbs of positivity which you don't know which will trickle in different spaces because they can see it's a thing, they can visualize it, it's a physical manifestation, it is happening.
It's like, oh, okay, I've got a reference point.
Yeah.
You know, where there wasn't anything before. Oh, there's a reference point. Oh, the first Māori fashion coalition with NZTE ever in New Zealand's history. There's a reference point. Oh, 15 Māori creatives went over to China and they met with the most high level, you know. Oh, they're going to Shanghai. They're showing there for the first time.
It's a thing.
It's a thing.
Yeah.
It's real. So yeah.
That's well, really proud of you, Kitty. It's really cool.
I'm just trying to keep up with you.
No, but I understand. Like I get it. Like if you don't do it, who will?
Well, if we don't. I think it might have started off with me, but it's very quickly turned into a group that are already paying it forward to other people. Yeah, it's a good culture.
So where do you see? You're a very smart human being. You know how things play out. How do you see this growing and the ecosystem either reacting, engaging, and potentially coming in with it?
Well, that probably pulls back to the full ecosystem that I've mapped out. So this is only one component of a much larger thing that's needed, and each of those things are needed to support the other so that this is really sustainable.
So this is the start of something.
This is just a part of a lot of things that have already been started and I've been working on for the last 3 years. Probably longer than that, to be honest. But all those things are really starting to nut in and come about. And it's, you know, the inclusion of tech, AI, you know what I mean? Like it's just this full inclusion of starting with something so beautiful and traditional and so close to our hearts because it is who we are, it's Te Ao Māori, and then doing this full sweep of who we are now in this world.
Now, on a mini little final note, I've been thinking a little bit lately around how, as culture's becoming cooler for the mainstream, the risk of culture is others that either don't understand it, are within it, or external, potentially exploiting culture if it's not owned by them. I was talking with Shane from Māori TV about this. I said, if you don't control the comms, the danger is if someone else does, what happens to that culture? Do you feel a responsibility for culture to be led the right way with a commercial sense so potentially it doesn't get exploited?
Absolutely. Like, that's something that is questioned every single time that, for us personally and any of the designers in here, actually any of the designers that are part of KΑHUI, it's just one of the fundamental factors of being part of the community is that first and foremost is your responsibility to your culture. Like, first and foremost, if you don't have that, then you have nothing. And also, how does that look to you? You know, how does that look and feel to you? So, you know, we talk to Māori IP specialist lawyers, we think about the Y262 claim, you know, there's all these factors that come into play. But because there's no policy in place, it's very, very hard to know black and white what's okay and what's not okay. So from our perspective, we discuss this all the time. Yeah. If it feels like, that feels like that sits right with me, do you think that feels that sits right with you? And so we have those discussions. And if you're, for instance, a couple of the designers, they draw from ko whaiwhai and taniko patterning, and so the question to them is, if you're drawing from that and then you're creating the contemporary version of that, where does the whakapapa of that come from, and have you asked for permission, or you know,
to do it the right way,
just to do it in a way that has total respect and responsibility back to the source. And
it's pretty deep, that one, because
it's really full on. It's really full on, and I find every day now I see misappropriation just more and more and more. And you know, it's a part of the world, and it's a part of that ongoing conversation where we just try and communicate and educate.
And I think that why it makes it tougher with culture is you need to be on offense as a collective to go to market that this is a thing, but then simultaneously you need to be on defense to trust what is now a great responsibility. It's that thing of like privilege to responsibility to privilege again. So yeah.
It is. Like, so we just wouldn't, there's no way it would happen. We wouldn't take a huge monetary deal if it meant compromising our cultural integrity in any way, because as far as we're concerned, we just couldn't. We just wouldn't.
Commerce is a whole lot harder when you integrate in culture.
It is a lot harder, but it's also a lot simpler. Yeah. You know what I mean? There's no grey. It is either wrong or.
And those things are timeless.
Yeah, well, if you haven't,
what is right?
Like, you know, people talk about integrity, authenticity, and all this kind of stuff, but unless you're actually living it.
Doesn't mean shit.
You're all shit. You're all shit.
I know. Well, we've had a mega yarn. You've got plenty of amazing, cool things. See, Lillian's in the mix. See it. The whole gang. I know you did actually get in there, so we'll let you go to it. Kiri, very proud of you.